So let's begin by reciting the verse for refuge and bodhicitta, followed by the Ganden Phagema, the 100 deities. And as we do this, please make sure that you adjust your motivation so that as we engage in this activity of explaining the Dharma, listening to the Dharma, all of this will not go to waste, but rather it will become a path, it will become a practice. So please make sure you adjust your motivation properly. So in our last class, Geshe was talking a bit about the nature of the mind. So we talked generally of how we can try to describe, identify, approximate, describe somehow the mind. And we looked at the benefits or the purpose of understanding this. So the most important thing to understand here, the principle is that whatever we do and whatever we experience, whether it is happiness or unhappiness, ultimately it comes down to the mind. And therefore, it becomes very important to tame or to discipline the mind. But to be able to discipline the mind, first of all, what we have to do is we have to understand the nature of the mind. We have to identify what the mind is. So it is all about this. As Geshe said, we talked about this in our previous class, but he would like to elaborate a bit more in today's class. All right, that's it. Okay, so we say there is one basic principle that we are all equal. You know, there's one basic instinct that we all have. We all wish to have happiness, and none of us wishes to have any suffering. But the big question is, how are we going to establish this happiness that we all want to have? And how are we going to avoid this suffering that none of us wishes to experience? So we say that the way that we will find the happiness we are looking is through the mind. All right, but which mind? Because actually here, there are many different types of mind, okay? So basically, what we're going to say is that there are two types of mind. There are types of mind that lead you to happiness, and there are other types of mind that lead you to suffering. And the thing is that we have to compare these two types of mind, and ultimately we must make a choice. You know how in every country we have this process of voting. And when you vote, you choose someone that you think will benefit the country. If you think that this person or this particular party is not going to benefit the country, obviously you're not going to waste your vote by choosing this person. You always vote or you always choose for the one that you think will bring the most benefit. So it is exactly like this with the different states of mind. And as we say, we have two categories. One type of mind brings you happiness. Another type of mind, group of minds, brings you a lot of suffering, right? So the thing here is that we should vote for, we should choose, we should pick the type of mind that is positive and gives you happiness. All right, so amongst the good or positive types of mind, because there are many, we have to say that the best are the wisdom realizing emptiness and the mind of bodhicitta. And then if we look at the group of negative states of mind, there are many. You could name quite a few, like anger and attachment and pride and so on and so forth. But the worst amongst the bad ones is the true grasping or the self-grasping and self-cherishing. Okay, so we have identified two minds that are the best and two minds that are the worst. So what we need to understand is that these two come as pairs of opposites, right? You have two of the worst and you have two of the best. So when you want to deal with or when you want to overcome grasping at the self, you have its opposite, that is the wisdom realizing selflessness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. And then on the other hand, you have the worst type of mind, which is this self-cherishing, the mind that is always thinking me, 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 me. So the opposite to that is the mind of bodhicitta, that is the mind that cherishes all other sentient beings. Okay, so in this way, when you can when you can see the comparison between the worst and the best, basically you can understand what is it that you want to adopt as your practice and what is it that you want to abandon. Okay, so basically what we're going to do here is we're going to vote, and when we vote, we choose the best. You don't want to waste your vote. You pick up what will be the biggest benefit. So we present it here and we say that these are the best types of mind, realization of emptiness and bodhicitta. But you could also say that these two minds actually are the essence of all the teachings of the Buddha. All the teachings of the Buddha, they come down, they consolidate, they boil down to these two types of mind. So the important thing is that if we do not study this presentation of mind, we will not be able to, correctly find the path that leads to happiness. There are many thoughts, there are many minds, there are many motivations. Like if you look around in the world, every individual on different occasions carries a different state of mind, or they follow a different state of mind. But following these, common states of mind actually is not the path that leads to happiness, right? So the best path that leads to happiness that we want to experience is these two types of mind, realization of emptiness and the mind of bodhicitta. Geshe says, I'm not a scholar of all the courses of psychology or all the presentations of happiness and its causes and so forth. But I would say, from my own understanding, that the best presentation that we have is in the Buddhist teachings. Therefore, if you are looking for the path that leads to happiness, you should look for it in those great Buddhist, the classical Buddhist texts that are composed by authoritative lamas, the classical text. If you look for a path of happiness where it does not exist, you will not find it there. So Geshe says, this is my opinion. I suggest that the best place to look for those things is the Buddhist texts. So, as we say, if you want to find a way to tame and discipline the mind, you really must look at this presentation that we have in the Buddhist text. It's a presentation that talks about the mind, you could say psychology, the nature of the mind, the different types of the mind, how different types of mind engage their object, and so forth. Also, if you're looking for the means that will establish peace and happiness, in this is better done through looking at those Tibetan texts or the Buddhist texts that present this inner science of the mind. Obviously, we have the outer science, and we have all experienced this incredible, innovation and, improvement in our lives. Geshe was saying, please do not misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that science or scientific progress is bad. However, I'm saying that is not 100% good. We're looking for something that will give us happiness, something that will give us peace of mind, something that will benefit us, isn't it? But can external material objects give us the excellent happiness or the stable happiness that we are looking for? So Geshe was saying, I doubt when I look at this material progress, of course, just let's look at the example of mobile phones. How much the mobile phones has made communication between different countries, between different people, so easy, so instant. But at the same time, it makes the individual almost addicted to this technology, and it makes everyone very busy. Like you have to be instantly available. You have to be always talking, always texting on your mobile phone. So does that actually bring you peace of mind? Does that bring you the, the stable happiness that you're looking for? Definitely benefits in some areas, but Geshe says, I see that there is a bit of harm as well, right? We lose something through this technology as well. Another example is nuclear weapons or atomic, everything that any way that we utilize atomic substances. How much benefit is there? There is. How much harm is there? There is quite a lot of harm. So when we look at this external progress, that is material progress, of course, we don't deny that there is benefit, right? We have all benefited from that, but we have to recognize that it doesn't give us this pure happiness, stable happiness we're looking for. So compare this now, right? Scientific external material progress to the presentation of the mind. Because once you understand the nature of the mind, by relying on the mind, you can actually establish the type of happiness that we're all looking for. Okay, there is an example here. When we offer water, we say that the water has 8 qualities. And it says, if you want to find the best water that is endowed with those 8 qualities, you have to go and dig in a place where there is a stream, underground stream of this water with the 8 qualities. If you go looking for this in a desert or in a place where good quality water does not exist, you will never get water with the 8 qualities. Okay, so when you look for happiness, for a path of happiness, you should look for it somewhere that it exists. Don't look for it somewhere that it does not exist. Okay, so again, Geshe says, I'm not saying science or material progress is bad. I'm just making a comparison here. So when we look at the teachings of the Buddha are classified in the collection of the 84,000 types of teachings. And these are presented, or these are organized in volumes such as the Kangyur and the Tengyur. There are many volumes in each one of these collections. All of those teachings that the Buddha gave were for the purpose of taming the mind. So, for example, when you come across a text that gives you a presentation of all the afflictions, it is there to present you negative states of mind that are to be abandoned. When you come to a text that gives you a presentation of all the positive states of mind, it is there to give you a presentation so you can see what is it that you have to cultivate. Ultimately, we want to follow this path of cultivating positive states of mind because the goal is to reach the ground of Buddhahood. Otherwise, any other path will not be able to give us stable happiness. So we must make this plan, we must set this goal that I want to achieve the state of Buddhahood in this life, or if not in this life, in the next life. Right? So make it the target and try to find the path that really leads there. Okay, so it is, we state here that we set as our target to reach the state of Buddhahood. However, to reach the state of Buddhahood, we must establish the causes for that. And the causes are the 2 accumulation of merit and accumulation of wisdom. Now, we understand the accumulation of merit, depending on your motivation, of course. There are activities such as making offerings, circumambulations, prostrations, all of this goes towards the accumulation of merit. But the other thing is that we also need to put together the accumulation of wisdom. And the accumulation of wisdom comes with cultivating the mind that realizes emptiness. So you see, even if you approach it in this way, the presentation of the mind is indispensable. Because if you don't understand the mind, how are you going to understand the type of mind that realizes emptiness? If you don't understand this, how are you going to put together the accumulation of wisdom? If you don't have the accumulation of wisdom, you're missing one of the causes to establish Buddhahood. Ultimately, what we want to do is to increase, to cultivate all the positive, good states of mind, and we want to reduce, ultimately abandon all the negative states of mind. And through establishing the positive and abandoning all the negative, we will reach the precious state of Buddhahood. When you work towards that and you reach the precious state of Buddhahood, you are free from fear. Right now, when you think that I will die, most of us experience fear, right? Geshe says, I don't know about you, but in my case, I think when I think about my death, I think about many things I have done in the past, other things I should have done and I haven't done them. And then considering all the possibilities of rebirth after this life, they are unfortunate migrations. You might even be reborn in the hells. And when you think about that, that brings fear in your mind. So basically, we are very much afraid of the Lord of Death within how, if we are within cyclic existence, definitely He's the Lord. He has dominion over us. But once you obtain the state of Buddhahood, you escape that, you achieve the deathless state, you are not afraid anymore of this. So in Master Aryadeva, in the 400 stanzas, has this verse that says, when worldly beings hear a thing or hear you will die, how much afraid they are. And then they need to hear about the state of Buddhahood. So worldly beings refers to all of us, or beings in worldly existence. So when suddenly you contemplate death or you hear, oh, you will die, all of us will generate fear. But then we need to know that there is a state of Buddhahood, that is the deathless state. Okay, we need to understand that our continuum, our mind stream, does not become non-existent at death. It continues. That's why it's called the stream, the mind stream. There is a saying here that says you must definitely open up the eyes of wisdom and dispel the darkness of your ignorance. By opening the eyes of wisdom, you should look at what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned. If you are deprived of that eyes of wisdom, even though you might have 1,000 eyes in your body, you will still be like a blind person, since you will not be able to see the crucial point of what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned. So it is actually Master Baba Viveka in his text Umanimbo, so the essence of the middle way, where it says, if you do not have the mind that discriminates this, you do not have the eyes of wisdom. If you don't have the eyes of wisdom, since you will not be able to see what is a path and not a path, you're like a blind person. So if you're lacking the eyes of wisdom, if you have not opened up your eyes of wisdom, you will not be able to discriminate between what is the path to be abandoned and what is a non-path, which is something, or a path to be practiced, and what is a non-path, which is something that needs to be abandoned. And therefore it says, open up your mind, your eyes, and look towards enlightenment. So it is like they say, we say that if we do not open our eyes of wisdom, if we do not train ourselves to recognize what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned, we remain asleep with our eyes shut. And if we do this, it means that from life after life, we will experience the many heavy suffering of the hells and other lower migrations. Why is this the case? The case is because externally, there are many things that we consider to be very durable, very stable, such as, for example, the big mountains. However, even those external structures that we considered to be very stable, they are destroyed. They are destroyed through the elements of water, of fire, and wind. And at the end, they are reduced to dust. Like, great things that were stable, at the end, they are destroyed. However, the continuum or the stream of the mind is totally durable. It cannot be destroyed in this way. And this means that the mind, the stream of the mind, will continue. Even though science has created these new types of weapons that can bring about great destruction, definitely these weapons and these means can destroy houses and other external substances, structures. However, they cannot destroy the mental continuum of even a little ant. So because they cannot destroy that mental continuum, it means that the mind will continue life after life, taking another rebirth, and in each rebirth will experience suffering. So the bottom line of all this, is open up your eyes of wisdom, train so that you can recognize what is to be practiced and what is to be abandoned. So we know that there is a mind stream that continues, and because there is continuity of the mind, there will be future suffering. If we want to avoid that future suffering, the solution is easy. We just have to train into developing positive states of mind. But we have this attitude that says, to generate realization of emptiness is very difficult. To generate bodhicitta is very difficult. To understand the presentation of the mind is very difficult. So we tend to categorize all these areas, all these things as difficult. And because we think they're difficult, in a sense, we shy away. But what happens is, at the moment, they appear to be difficult because we lack familiarity. If we develop sufficient familiarity, then realization of emptiness will be easy to generate. The mind of bodhicitta will be easy to generate. But, let's be honest and ask ourselves, do I have familiarity with this? Do I develop familiarity with emptiness, with bodhicitta, with all these states of mind? Isn't it? The great master Shantideva in Bodhisattva's Ways of Life has said, there is nothing that does not become easier with familiarity. So if we develop familiarity, definitely it will become easier to generate these results, right? So the thing is that we don't meditate at all. We don't meditate on emptiness. We don't meditate on bodhicitta. And then we sit around and we have this conversation and we say, I cannot generate realization of emptiness. I cannot generate bodhicitta. On one hand, we fully understand that if we don't establish the causes, we will not get the result. And on the other hand, it's like we are a bit surprised that, how come I haven't, it is so difficult. Why can I not generate this realization? But the answer is right there. As Master Shantideva says, if you develop familiarity, it will become easier. This is all it takes. It takes a bit of training to do. So it is like this. As we say, we have to develop familiarity. And how do you develop familiarity? Basically, you repeat. You go back and repeat. You analyze, you reflect, you go back and analyze again. You think a bit more about it, and you repeat the process. So every time you go over it, you develop familiarity. So Geshe here is giving two examples. One example is ABC, the alphabet. Is it hard for us? No, because we have trained, because we have recited so many times. The second example, walking. Does it take too much effort, too much of a motivation? Is there too much thinking that has to happen with walking? No, we just walk automatically. You don't have to think about it. You just walk one step after the other. Why? Because it's an activity that we do every day. We have great familiarity. Okay, so it is like this. Up to now, we have experienced quite a lot of suffering. And if we do not develop this familiarity, again, in the future, we will experience even more suffering. This experience of suffering will continue. Without making the effort to cultivate familiarity, it's not good for us to just sit around and say, oh, I haven't generated this realization. Oh, I find this difficult. Oh, I cannot do that. All right. So we just have to be very careful here. It's all a matter of familiarity. Apply yourself to this, and you will start seeing things changing. Okay, so the thing is, when we look at the mind, so for example, we have physical expression, we have verbal expression, and then we have the mind. And if you compare, you see that in terms of the physical and the verbal, the mind has much more freedom and it has much more power. So what we mean when we say that the mind has more freedom, we mean that the mind can actually think anything. So whether you are like a very successful person or whether you are like a beggar or a very, humble individual, you have that freedom of mind. You can think whatever. And also, if we look at the way that the mind engages different objects, the mind has the freedom to engage any object whatsoever. Actually, with our mind, we can engage objects that physically or verbally we would not dare to engage. So, for example, looking at someone else's wife, right? Mentally, you can do it. If you indicate with your eyes or with your physical expression or with your verbal expression that you're looking at someone else's partner, you will be in very big trouble. So we don't do this, but mentally, you have the freedom to do whatever. Another thing is that the mind has great power because the mind actually gives the order to all parts of the body to act in this particular way, for the hands, for the legs to move in this way, to move in that way. All of this is orders that comes from the mind. So as we say, the mind has this freedom to do many things and power to do many things that physically and verbally we would not do them, right? So at the same time, if we don't set some borders, if we don't set some limits to the mind, then we are in very big trouble. So we say that thing that, there is freedom, the mind is free, it can think whatever. But if you don't set some parameters, some limits, and you say, oh, I can think whatever, I can do whatever with my mind, you will see that you will end up in trouble. Yes, you have freedom, but the thing is you have to follow a path or a way of thinking that is unmistaken. Otherwise, if you say, oh, don't interfere, it's none of your business. I can think whatever, this is my mind, I can do whatever. Yes, you can do whatever, but understand that there are choices, there are different ways the mind can go. If it goes the right direction, you will establish happiness. If the mind, oh, I'm free, I can think whatever, is loose and goes into a negative direction, this will bring about suffering. So here we are, all of us, kind of like screaming, saying that I want happiness, I don't want suffering. So we have to be aware there is freedom in the mind, but it has to choose the right path to bring happiness. So we say the other aspect is that the mind is very powerful. Basically, it's powerful, is in control, and it controls us. It will be very hard to find any creature, any living being, from the smallest insect all the way up to the top. It will be very hard to find a living being that is not controlled by the mind. Everyone is controlled by the mind. Some people might come up with an example and they say, oh, what about an Arya Buddha? The Arya Buddha is not under the control of anything. The Arya Buddha also is under the control of the mind, of his or her mind, because is under the influence of great compassion. It is great compassion that moves, that motivates, that instigates all activities, such as, for example, teaching Dharma to disciples and so forth. So I think we can say categorically, there is not one being that is not under the power, under the influence of the mind. So we wouldn't say it is a definition, but definitely you could say it's a pervasion, meaning it is true in all cases that all beings are under the influence of the mind. Why? Because some are under the influence of virtuous mind, some are under the influence of non-virtuous minds, and some are under the influence of neutral minds. That's all. So we say that everyone is under the influence of the mind, but the thing is that the mind itself is under the influence of afflictions, of the three poisons, and so forth, right? So the mind has become a slave to those afflictions. And as a result of that, everything that we do is under the influence of all these afflictions, and the suffering that we experience is endless. So they describe this as like a constant, it's almost like a waterfall of suffering, or like the waves of suffering comes endless, one after the other, right? So a stream of suffering that carries you. And still we think, I am seeking for happiness. So still we do all these activities. We're very active looking for happiness whilst we're under the influence of the mind that is a servant to afflictions. So just to indicate how the mind is under the power of afflictions, we have a verse from Bodhisattva's Ways of Life where Master Shantideva says, the hatred, the craving, and other afflictions are our enemies. Although they have no arms and legs, although they are not heroic, nevertheless, acting like friends, they keep us under their power as servants. Okay, so they have all these afflictions, they have a particular way of keeping us under them, keeping us to the level of a servant that has to obey them. So Bodhisattva's Ways of Life, again, has various verses that talk about the harm that all those afflictions cause to us. So it takes, for example, hatred, and he says, let me explain how hatred actually harms you. When your mind becomes angry and filled with hatred, you see red. So we have this expression in English, you see red. It means that everything that you see appears to be red. The body does not have any more the comfort, the experience of coming in contact with soft objects. The food that you eat does not have any taste. It's like as if the food has lost its taste. Your sleep is very difficult. So we know when we are angry, when we are upset, we cannot sleep very well. And any activity that you do, this anger robs you of a good conduct. So usually you might be a polite person, someone who is behaving physically, verbally, expressing yourself in a good conduct. Anger will steal this away from you, will take this away from you. So it says it's like a poisonous snake. And when other people look at you, when you are in that state of anger, they are displeased. Immediately, they see something which is so unpleasant, isn't it? So you can see here it's giving a presentation of the faults of anger. It shows how anger harms us. So the message is very clear. This is something that causes you harm. This is something to abandon. And again, Bodhisattva's Ways of Life, there's a verse that says, when anger takes over your mind, there is no peace in mind. It means your mind will not experience happiness. Your mind will not experience any peace. There will be no sleep, and you will become unstable and unreliable. So with anger, you are not a stable person anymore. So once again, faults of anger identified in Bodhisattva's ways of life. So in Bodhisattva's ways of life, we have a lot of presentation or a lot of talk about anger, right? So how anger harms you, the problems that come from anger. But just as we have all these problems and suffering coming from anger, we have these problems coming from various type of afflictions. So what do we mean by affliction? How do you understand affliction? Affliction is a negative state of mind that when it is present in the mind of an individual, it makes the mind unhappy and unpeaceful. All right. So that's the general definition of affliction. But of course, then you ask what, so, okay, this is what affliction, this is how afflictions operate. That's their function. They make us unhappy and take away the peace of the mind. What types of afflictions are there? There are many types, such as anger, attachment, confusion. And each one has its own individual way of making you unhappy or disturbing your peace. So attachment disturbs you in its own particular way. Anger disturbs you in its own particular way, and so forth. So it is like this here. It introduces us to the faults and the suffering that we will experience if we allow the mind to come under the influence or under the power of, let's say, anger. So if you allow your mind to come under anger, you will experience this and this problem. So it just introduces us to this, it makes it very clear. So, for example, what has to happen here is that because we all have a mind, in any given situation, we have to examine and say, okay, at this time, what happened to my mind? My mind was under the influence of what? So if it is my mind was under the influence of anger, the next question is, and do I want this? Is this beneficial? And the answer is no. Next question, what do I want? I want to have happiness, right? Therefore, should I be under the influence of anger? Answer, no. All right. So it is like this at any given time, we have to examine the mind, identify under which affliction we have fallen under. Okay. So this is the benefit of this presentation is we want to study this, we want to train this, not to become more familiar with anger, but to become more familiar with asking the question, like, who is governing my mind right now? And do I want this or not? So if we have been explaining, what happens to the ordinary individual. So let's look now to what happens in the case of those who have entered the path. So let's look at hearers and solitary realizers. When they are still training in the path, they train themselves to see the whole of a cyclic existence as a pit of fire. So since they see it like this, they generate the wish to be free from that. So they see that any temporary happiness or pleasure within cyclic existence is totally useless. It's like a weed or a straw, a piece of straw. You have no use for it, right? If you pull out a weed or you have a little piece of straw, it's just like a rubbish. You want to get rid of it. Okay. And this attitude becomes the cause for them to obtain the state of liberation. Why? Because it is this way of thinking that allows them to generate genuine renunciation, or in other words, genuinely have the wish of seeking for the sake of liberation. So because they have that attitude, that state of mind, the activities that they do become the cause that establish liberation. Okay, so we see Master Nagarjuna also in his work, The Friendly Letter, where he says, even if suddenly the hair was on fire, they have no time to put it out. What is the most important thing for them is to make sure there will be no rebirth. So it's describing these individuals that say the number one priority for them is to stop taking another rebirth in cyclic existence, right? If you can achieve that state where you do not take rebirth due to karma and affliction, you will be fine. If you miss that, it means you will take another rebirth due to karma and affliction. That means you establish a physical basis that is described as being contaminated aggregates. So what happens when we establish contaminated aggregates? What happens is that we spend our life trying to provide food for this body, comfort for this body, and then experience suffering, right? It's a basis. We establish a basis for experiencing suffering. So it says the number one priority is to make sure they do not take another type of rebirth like this. So even if the hair was on fire, it's like they will be too busy to attend to this, right? Meaning I don't have time to even put off stop the fire on my hair, on my head, because I am so focused on stopping myself from taking another rebirth due to karma and afflictions. Okay, we're coming to the end of the presentation here. So let's stop here and let's all of us offer the short mandala offering. And when we offer the mandala offering, just be very clear, you're making this offering to all the Buddhas so that this activity also become an amassing of your accumulation. We just heard on this verse that the true practitioners, they do not waste any time on any activities, even if it comes to, putting out the fire on their head. They are just intent on amassing the accumulation and engaging in purification of negativity. In our case, we actually waste a lot of time in meaningless activities. So at least now we have here the opportunity to offer the mandala and just think it's for me to accumulate some virtue, so I do not have to take this type of rebirth again. Okay, pure practitioners practice in this way. They don't waste the time on meaningless affairs. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gisela.